The silence of the forest is a lie. It is a veil hiding the violence waiting to erupt. Deep in the undergrowth, a pair of amber eyes locks onto a target. A massive herbivore, grazing peacefully, twitches its ear. It senses the shift in the air, the scent of death. In a heartbeat, the stillness shatters. Muscles coil and snap like steel cables. The predator launches, a blur of fur and fangs. The prey bellows, a sound of primal terror, and stamps the ground, turning its horns toward the threat. This is not a dance, this is a slaughter. The pack closes in, cutting off escape routes with military precision. They coordinate not out of love, but out of hunger. The lead hunter lunges, jaws clamping onto the throat, crushing the windpipe. The prey thrashes, fighting for one more breath, one more second of existence. But nature is indifferent to its plea. The struggle slows. The light fades from the prey's eyes. The feast begins. This brutal scene, the tearing of flesh, the desperate fight for territory, the merciless culling of the weak, is not an anomaly. It is the fundamental engine of our reality. We look at nature and see beauty, but if you look closer, you see a battlefield. Every creature alive today is the descendant of a survivor, a champion in a billion-year-old war for resources. But where did this instinct come from? Where did this drive to survive, this chaos of creation and destruction, actually begin? It didn't start in the jungle. It didn't start in the ocean. This story of violence, of chaos becoming order, began long before the first heartbeat. It began in the cold, violent void of the cosmos. Before there was rock, before there was flesh, there was only the scream of the universe being born. The Earth did not begin as a paradise, it began as a crime scene. Imagine the early universe. It is a place of unimaginable violence. There is no silence here. There is the roar of gravity crushing matter together. We often think of space as empty and quiet, but the nursery of our solar system was a chaotic storm of gas and dust. Billions of years ago, a massive cloud of molecular gas collapsed. Why? Perhaps a nearby supernova exploded, sending a shockwave through the galaxy like a ripples in a pond. This shockwave was the trigger. It forced the dust to clump, to collide, to heat up. In the center of this swirling maelstrom, pressure mounted. It became so intense that atoms were crushed together, fusing, igniting a nuclear fire. The sun turned on. A blast of solar wind erupted, pushing the lighter gases outward, leaving behind the heavy stuff, the rock, the metal, the dust. This is where the story of Earth truly begins. It was not formed by a gentle hand, but by a series of cosmic car crashes. Look at your hand. Look at the skin, the veins, the blood pooling beneath. Do you know what that is? It is the debris of dead stars. The universe in its infancy consisted mostly of hydrogen and helium, boring, simple gases. You cannot build a planet out of them. You cannot build a human out of them. The elements that make up the core of our world, iron, carbon, oxygen, silicon, were forged in the bellies of ancient, massive stars. These giants lived fast and died young, exploding in cataclysmic supernovas that scattered their guts across the galaxy. We are walking, talking monuments to these dead stars. We are quite literally stardust, but this dust had to be gathered. In the swirling disk of debris surrounding our newborn sun, a violent game of billiards began. Grain hit grain, pebble hit pebble, rocks smashed into rocks. Gravity is a greedy landlord. The larger the rock became, the more it pulled in its neighbors. These weren't polite mergers, they were supersonic impacts. The friction generated heat intense enough to melt stone. The chaotic cloud began to organize itself through sheer brute force. From this chaotic dance of destruction, a protoplanet emerged. It was a ball of molten hate, glowing red in the darkness. This was Earth, but not as you know it. It was a house being built by fire. As this ball of molten rock grew, it began to sort itself out. This is the first act of order rising from chaos. The heavy iron and nickel, dragged down by gravity, sank to the center, forming the dense, metallic core, the heart of our planet. The lighter rock floated up to form the mantle and the fragile, thin crust we stand on today. But the violence wasn't over. The solar system was a shooting gallery. Picture a young Earth, barely cooled, struggling to form a skin. It is spinning wild and fast. Then out of the darkness, a shadow appears. It was a planet the size of Mars. Scientists call it Theia. It was an errant wanderer, a rogue planet on a collision course with destiny. The impact was the single most violent event in the history of our world. It wasn't just a hit. It was a near-total annihilation. Imagine the energy of trillions of atomic bombs detonating at once. Theia slammed into the Earth with such force that it liquefied the surface of our planet. The shockwave rippled through the globe. Theia was pulverized, its iron core sinking into Earth to merge with ours, making our planet denser, stronger, more magnetic. But the debris, the molten guts of both planets, was blasted into orbit. A ring of red-hot lava circled the Earth. It looked like Saturn, but made of fire. Over time, gravity, the great sculptor, gathered this debris. It coalesced into a sphere. The moon was born. Look up at the moon tonight. It looks peaceful, a silent guardian, but it is the daughter of violence. It is a scar from our violent birth, and its presence changed everything. The moon acted as an anchor. Before the moon, Earth wobbled chaotically on its axis. The climate would have swung from freezing to boiling in mere centuries. The moon stabilized us. It slowed our frantic rotation. It gave us the rhythm of the tides. It created the seasons. Without that massive collision, without that destruction, complex life on Earth would be impossible. Following the collision, Earth was a literal hell. The Hadean Eon, named after Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. The surface was a magma ocean, bubbling and popping, releasing noxious gases. There was no oxygen to breathe, only carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor. The atmosphere was thick, crushing, and hot enough to melt lead. But order requires cooling. As the bombardment slowed, the planet began to radiate heat into space. The magma crusted over, forming black, jagged rock. The atmosphere, heavy with steam, began to change. As the temperature dropped, the steam condensed, and then the rains came. This was not a spring shower. This was a deluge of biblical proportions. It rained for millions of years. Can you conceive of a storm that lasts for centuries? The water poured down onto the hot rocks, sizzling, evaporating, and falling again. It filled the lowlands. It carved the first canyons. It created the first oceans. These weren't the blue oceans of today. They were green with iron, acidic, and hot. But they were water. And water is the stage where the drama of life performs. Even with the oceans formed, peace was elusive. The late heavy bombardment pummeled the Earth. Asteroids the size of mountains slammed into the crust, vaporizing oceans, resetting the clock. It was a cycle of destruction and reconstruction. Every time an asteroid hit, it brought gifts: water, carbon, amino acids, the building blocks of life delivered via cosmic airmail. The crust broke and healed, broke and healed. Crucially, deep beneath our feet, the molten core churned. This movement generated a magnetic field, an invisible force field reaching out into space. This shield deflected the lethal solar wind that would have otherwise stripped away our atmosphere and dried up our oceans. While the surface was a war zone, the planet was building its armor. Eventually, the chaos subsided. The Earth found its rhythm. The rock, the water, and the fire below learned to coexist. Plate tectonics began the slow, grinding dance of continents. The carbon cycle began to regulate the temperature. The planet stopped being a chaotic inferno and became a system, a machine. But a machine needs an operator, or in this case, an inhabitant. Somewhere in the dark, warm depths of the chemical ocean, or perhaps in a sun-drenched shallow pool, a miracle happened. The chemistry stopped being just chemistry and started trying to be biology. At hydrothermal vents, deep underwater volcanoes, mineral-rich water spewed out. In the microscopic pores of rocks, complex molecules began to gather. They were organizing. Lipids formed bubbles, tiny spheres with a reaction happening inside and a world outside. This is the defining moment, the creation of self versus other. Before this, there was just drifting matter. Now there was a border, a wall, a fortress. Inside that tiny membrane, the first fight against entropy began. Matter was trying to remember. It was trying to replicate. We don't know exactly how it happened, but a molecule emerged that could copy itself. RNA, DNA, the code of life. But here is where the story turns back to violence. The moment you have two self-replicating molecules in a soup with limited resources, you have competition. You have the first war. This was the primordial selection. Molecules that copied themselves faster or were more stable survived. Those that made errors, mutations, sometimes found those errors to be advantages. A slightly thicker membrane, a better way to grab energy. The survival of the fittest didn't start with lions, it started with molecules. It was a blind, slow, persistent process. For billions of years, life was microscopic. It was single-celled, simple, and struggling, but it was tenacious. Then a group of bacteria figured out a trick that would change the planet forever. They looked up at the sun, that deadly ball of radiation, and found a way to eat the light. Photosynthesis. These cyanobacteria began to drink sunlight and water, and as a waste product, they released a gas, oxygen. Today, we love oxygen, but back then, it was the greatest toxic spill in history. Oxygen was poison to the anaerobic life that ruled the Earth. As the cyanobacteria pumped out oxygen, they caused a mass extinction. They rusted the oceans, turning them red. They froze the planet by stripping away the greenhouse gases. But this destruction paved the way for complexity. Oxygen is a high-octane fuel. If you can survive it, you can burn energy faster, grow bigger, and do more than just drift. With oxygen flooding the atmosphere, life upgraded. Simple cells merged to become complex cells, eukaryotes. They built internal power plants, mitochondria. They began to cluster together. Why be a single cell when you can be a colony? Cells started specializing. You handle the movement, I'll handle the digestion. This was the birth of multicellular organisms, and with complexity came new ways to interact. We return now to the theme of the hunt. For a long time, life was just mats of slime on the ocean floor. Grazers, peaceful, boring. Then the Cambrian explosion happened. Somewhere a creature developed a hard bit, a tooth, a claw. Another creature developed a light-sensitive spot, an eye. The moment the first eye opened, the rules of the game changed forever. Suddenly you could see your dinner, and your dinner could see you. The ocean became an arena. This is the origin of the terror we felt in the opening scene. The arms race began. The prey developed armor trilobites. The predators developed crushing jaws, anomalocaris. Speed became essential. Camouflage became an art form. Every adaptation you see in the animal kingdom, the tiger's stripes, the turtle's shell, the eagle's vision, was forged in this ancient underwater war. Nature is not cruel because it hates us. Nature is cruel because it rewards efficiency. If you cannot hunt, you starve. If you cannot hide, you die. This pressure cooker of predation drove evolution into overdrive. Fins, spines, poisons, ink sacs, every invention was a weapon or a shield. The oceans were crowded, they were dangerous, so some pioneers looked to the edge, to the barren, rocky shores. The land was a harsh frontier. There was no water to support your body weight. Gravity was crushing. The sun dried out your skin, but there was food. Plants had already made the jump, turning the gray rock green, and there were no predators, yet. Brave fish, perhaps escaping a chase, dragged themselves into the mud. Their fins grew stout, turning into protolegs. Their swim bladders, used for buoyancy, were repurposed into lungs to gulp air. This transition was agonizing. It took millions of years. Amphibians ruled the swamps, but they were tethered to the water. They had to return to lay their eggs, their jelly-like offspring vulnerable to drying out. Then came the ultimate invention for land conquest, the amniotic egg. A private pond encased in a hard shell. With this, life broke its chains. Reptiles could walk into the desert. They developed waterproof skin, scales, and strong skeletons to fight gravity. They didn't just visit the land, they conquered it. The shoreline was no longer a wall, it was a gateway. Dinosaurs rose, mammals scurried in the shadows. The continents drifted apart and crashed together. Through ice ages and volcanic eruptions, life held on, it fought, it killed, it reproduced. How do we know all this? The Earth keeps a diary. Go to a canyon, look at the layers of rock. Those stripes in the sandstone, they are pages in a book. Bottom layers tell of ancient seas, middle layers of swampy forests, top layers of dry deserts. Embedded in these rocks are the fossils, the bones of the losers and the winners of this grand game. A trilobite curled up in defense, a dinosaur footprint preserved in mud. These are the echoes of the struggle. They remind us that we are late arrivals to a very old party. Science gives us the how. It explains gravity, fusion, natural selection, and plate tectonics. It draws the timeline from the Big Bang to the smartphone. But as we stand at the top of the food chain, looking back at the chaos that created us, we are left with the why. Why does the universe bother? Why does matter organize itself into complex forms that can feel pain, love, and wonder? From the violent collision of planets to the microscopic war of bacteria, everything has driven towards this moment, towards consciousness. The Earth stopped being a rock and started being a mind. The story of Earth is a story of scars. It is a story of a chaotic, violent universe that somehow, against all odds, managed to create a home. It managed to create a place where rock, water, and fire could learn to breathe. We are the eyes of the universe, opening up to look at itself. As you go about your day, remember the ground beneath your feet. It is not just dirt. It is the graveyard of stars and the cradle of life. It is a testament to the power of time and pressure. So I have a question for you. If chaos is necessary for order, what collision in your life turned out to be a blessing in disguise? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to read how you've evolved. If you found value in this journey through time, if you felt the heat of the ancient earth and the spray of the primal oceans, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Join our pack. We explore the mysteries of existence every week, and we don't want you to get left behind in the evolutionary dust.
Join our pack. Let's explore the mystery together.